Welcome to Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance, where we uncover the powerful truth about your beginnings and how they've shaped your entire life. I'm Shannon O'Flaherty, and in this show, we're not just exploring your birth, we are dismantling the chains of generational trauma. We're diving into the core of who you are, peeling back layers of inherited beliefs and behaviors that have held you back for far too long. This isn't just about understanding your past, it is about reclaiming your future. Get ready to break free. This is Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance, and your transformation starts now. Hi, I'm Shannon O'Flaherty, and I'm so excited to be here today with my wonderful guest and friend, Dr. Helen Orombi. And in this episode, we're exploring how our past experiences and generational conditioning and societal influences shape our identity and impact our healing journey. Now, I'm also very excited because this is my first time going solo without Dr. Pat. So now it's officially my show, and I'm going to be interviewing fascinating, very wise guests all along. And of course, I wanted to start with Dr. Helen Orombi, who is an empowerment and transformational coach. And she specializes in empowering conscious, self-actualizing women who are ready to break free from survival-based patterns of fear, unworthiness, and self-doubt. And she has a doctorate in family and marriage therapy and positive psychology, EFT tapping, chakra intuition. I mean, the list goes on. This woman is altogether with it and capable and knows so much. So, Helen, thank you so much for being here with me and joining me in my first show today. I'm so excited to have you here. Your work in helping women break free from all of these patterns is so aligned with what we're exploring. But before we dive in, can you share a little bit about your journey and about Ubuntu? In fact, tell us what Ubuntu is. That's even in the title of the show.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me here. And first of all, congratulations, Shannon. I am so proud of you and I'm so excited for you. So congratulations. About my journey. So this work to me is both personal, professional, spiritual, the whole shebang. And it's rooted in my own journey of breaking free from my generational patterns. So I grew up in Uganda, and the idea of Ubuntu, which is this idea that I am because we are, was woven through the fabric of my existence, right? So unlike the West is more about, and I'm generalizing, please, I'm generalizing, don't quote me. It focuses more on individuality, whereas where I grew up, everything that the individual did impacted the collective. And so it was more about the collective than the individual. And the beauty about that is I grew up really knowing who I am. I had this strong sense of belonging, which gave me this resilience, right? So,
Well,
you with me?
it's really interesting because we've had so many conversations, and because your childhood in Uganda is very different than a childhood, than a childhood in the West. And I mean,
Yeah.
I also moved to a foreign country, to South America. But depending on where you're raised culturally, it can vastly impact your generational um, sort of groundwork for what's to come and also how you're going to view the world moving forward.
Yeah.
So before you get into that, before we just get going, why don't you just tell everybody how they can find you, how they can contact you? I don't want to forget that part. That's really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can find me at helenorombi.coachesconsole.com.
Okay,
Helen Orombi, say again.
these
Helen,
will all be listed too.
okay,
Yeah.
I'll say it again. helenorombi.coachesconsole.com. That's where you
Okay.
can find me.
Thank you very much. And you can find me at shannonbtb.com or shannonoflaherty.com. Okay, so go on into that. The difference between in our Western society is kind of individual,
Yeah.
whereas in Ugandan upbringing, it's very much about the collective.
Right. And there's a little bit of spirituality tied into it, right? It's this belief that we are interconnected, that everything that I do doesn't just impact me. It's not just about me. Whatever I do is going to impact the collective.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
I really love that because if you've ever read The Zero Point Field by Lynn McTaggart, and she talks about that kind of grid of the universe, that everything that happens, like the butterflies flapping their wings, it starts that process throughout the world. So this
yeah,
is kind of what you're talking about, but on a
absolutely.
more human, kind of literal level, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting about that, as we were having that conversation before coming here, I created a membership called the Awakening Women Collective precisely because our healing, our transformation needs to happen in a collective, needs to happen in a community so that community can support you. So, yeah.
So can you talk about some of these, the ways that these patterns have manifested, um, and how you've experienced that collective in your childhood and culture growing up?
Okay. So, is it okay if I kind of backtrack a little bit to
Yeah,
answer?
you do you.
I do. All right. So I wanted to share this story because it kind of shows you how our patterns, whatever we inherit, affects us. So when I was getting my doctorate, we had to do a genealogram, which is a family tree. And so what that entailed was we had to track back 5 generations. And I had to interview all my living relatives and then just go all the way back. And that experience allowed me to see all the generational patterns in my family of origin, my family tree, going back 5 generations. And we talked about
That,
this, right?
that's amazing. I mean, that
Right?
should be a school project for everybody.
Right? Right? So
Yeah.
yeah, you really know who you are. And so I got to identify the patterns that were passed down in my lineage. So there was a lot of polygamy, right? Um, there was there was this sense that women didn't have as much opportunities as the men did. Women weren't as educated. So, for instance, my grandfather didn't allow her to go to school, and so those things were passed down. And the way that affected me, especially my mom's experiences. I love school. I love education.
This is
Education. So,
really
go ahead.
This is an important point because we think about all of the negative things that are passed down from our ancestors because all the good stuff, well, don't change it, except that all of the negative things that get
Yeah.
passed down don't, there's always yin and yang, right? So there's a way to perceive these things. So your mother, she felt left out from
Yeah.
not being able to study because she wanted to go to school. So what did she do?
She drilled it in me, the value and the importance of education. So I am educated up to a zoo because of that patterning, that conditioning. And it was a good thing. Yeah, it was a
Didn't
really
she
good thing.
start, didn't she create some schools? Am I making that up?
No, you're not making it up. Look at you. Look at you. You
Pay
remembered.
attention when we talk.
You remembered. So as part of her legacy, she created a primary school in the, I guess, neighborhood where we live, just for the education of kids, especially girls, because girls that the society doesn't necessarily encourage the education of girls. And so that is part of her passion, is like, I'm going to start a school. So not only was it drummed in me, but she's doing it within the community. So thank you for remembering that.
Well, I just thought that that was a really perfect example of
Yeah.
she could have been like, oh, I hate you, Dad, for not allowing me to be educated. And now I'm just without education and no knowledge, and I'm just going to be a victim. And I'm going to find that very limiting in my life, right? That's one
Yeah.
way you could go. But she didn't. She was like, okay, Dad, that wasn't really cool. I think I'm going to find a way to educate myself and start a school and bring this opportunity to people behind me who, because I didn't have that opportunity and I felt so left out. So I'm not going to let that pattern continue. And this is why it's so important to get the grounding from our ancestors. What are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with that?
Yeah.
So that was a
Yeah.
really important point. And you also said something really brilliant about polygamy because I remember kind of
Right.
raising my
Okay. So I know
eyebrows.
I knew you were going to bring that up. So, all the generations, my father was one of the first that didn't practice polygamy. So my parents are married to one another, but polygamy was um a common practice. So here's the positive. I know most of the time you think about polygamy, you only think about the negative, but here's the positive. Like being married to somebody kind of gave you status, but not only that, it it created labor because it's an agrarian society, right? And so the more wives and children you have, the more you can plant crops and the more food you will have. So there was an advantage to being polygamous
I
then.
mean, that's so fascinating because, you really try not to be judgmental, but
I
growing up,
know, that's why I brought it up.
right? Growing up in the format that I grew up in and in the world that I grew up in, we look at polygamy with a bit of a question mark. And you called me out on that and then you reframed that for me. So that was absolutely brilliant because, and I think it's also another really important thing for all of us to be aware that all of these different cultures that we all come from, the world around, we might have vastly different beliefs, right? In some country, they eat dogs that in this country are our pets, and we think, oh, that's terrible. But is it? I mean, if that's what they've always been doing, why should we judge what is good or what is bad just because it's a way that we don't know going forward? So I thought that that was a really important.
Yeah.
Um,
And I like what you said, right? Not judging other people's cultures because you don't understand how that got passed down. So like crickets and ants and all of that people ate and over here these are bugs, but you don't know how that got passed down. So I like your point, not being judgmental.
Well, I mean, it's part of the healing process that we both work with, really, isn't it? First and foremost, not judging yourself.
Yeah.
But where do we also learn judgment from? Those ancestors, they passed down their own kind of outline of what's acceptable and what's not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I do remember we were having this conversation, and I think I heard this from you, right? Sorry, I'm leading the conversation, aren't I?
Oh, you go. I'm happy. I'll just jump on in. This is what
Well,
the
it's like it's
shows
that
are about.
no, it's that idea of remember how you were telling me that cellular memory lives up to 7 generations
Yes,
in
yes, I
yeah,
totally. Yeah.
right. And so how all of this gets passed down through what science calls epigenetics. So all the good and all the bad, it all gets passed down. And I believe it's our responsibility as this generation, right, that has the choice. It is our responsibility to become conscious. It's our responsibility to to release those patterns. Yes, we didn't have a choice being born in it, but it is our responsibility. So I thought I would throw that in.
Absolutely. And the last show that I did with Dr. Pat, I talked about those three top kind of barrier patterns of not being visible, not being good enough, and being alone. And Dr. Helen and I studied together with Dr. Claire Zamet's
Yep.
Possibility of Women, and really fascinating stuff. Max, that's how I met Helen.
Yeah.
Um, so do you want to talk about that a little bit more, or would you like to continue talking about the ancestral stuff with what's been passed down in your family line how that manifests with these three top things. Because if these are three top patterns that certainly women in the West are dealing with, are they also the same in Uganda?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think I was fortunate enough to have a dad who is a lot more evolved than a lot of um, my counterparts around my age. And so um, we were raised in a culture where I remember this, like my dad, he would always say, look people in the eye. When you're talking to people, look people in the eye. But yet, part of the culture is like being submissive, looking down, not really looking people in the eye. And so, looking people in the eye, being visible, my family, I was fortunate, but not everybody had that. Not everybody had that experience. So, for the most part, yeah, subservient, contained, serve the man. Sorry to say. But yeah, those were the patterns that were passed down. And then, of course, scarcity, lack, limitation, poverty, all those were passed down too. So, yeah.
So, if there was a fear of visibility in your childhood growing up, how would that have manifested, like from your ancestors? You know what I mean? Like, can you give a specific
Mm.
how that might have been passed down, or the feeling of what the next generation would have done with it? I want to see like a progression of any of those patterns. It doesn't have to just be visibility. It can be not enough. It could be anything. But
Yeah.
ancestor was experiencing, how that was passed down, what the next generation did with it, how that manifested, what was
I
passed.
know. I hear you. So, like, I think the pattern that got manifested or passed down for me in my family is it's not good enough. Like the I am not good enough and
Mhm.
over giving and over functioning. Um, and the way that manifested for me partly is I have a lot of education, like I have a lot of degrees. I am trying to prove that I am enough. So
Mhm.
that's the negative. Like I am trying to prove that I am enough. And so that's
Mhm.
how it manifested for me. For other women,
Well, let's stick with you
okay,
because
yeah,
you're
let's stick with me because I can talk about me.
you. But so that was the negative aspect, right? The not
Yeah.
enough. But I
Mhm.
also remember you telling me about sitting under a particular tree in the
Mhm.
afternoon with your extended family and ancestors, and that every afternoon there was a gathering.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that's the positive, right? So part of the culture was every afternoon we would sit together. My grandmother's, all the extended family would sit together under the mango tree, and everybody would bring a craft. So crochet, knit, sewing, and all of that. And what I loved about that experience is you heard stories. You heard stories from my grandmother. You heard stories from extended family. My grandfather told a lot of stories. And so that is one of the positive is like you get to hear wisdom from the older generation in a way that is not really, it's not like that as much in the West, right? Because
No,
when you get
not at
old,
all.
you become obsolete.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And not only that, you're actively connecting with your ancestors, because a lot of people in the West don't even know. Some people don't even know their grandparents. You're also learning new skills that I know you had an amazing crochet business. In fact, this was one of your brilliant creations, my
Yes, it
gorgeous
is. Yes, it
poncho
is.
that she made me
Oh,
for Christmas. I'm sure you've all seen me wear it a million times because I barely ever take it off because I love it. So you went
you
on to
do
have
wash it, right?
I do
Just
sometimes. So really fascinating. But we're going to come back to this because we're just going to stop briefly for a short commercial break. and so that we can get a cup of tea or whatever you need to do, and then come back so that we can finish up or talk a little bit more about our ancestors, and then we'll go on from there and
Exactly.
stay for the end because there will be some healing coming up soon. See you after the break. So, welcome back, everybody. This is Dr. Helen Orombi, if you're just joining us. And we were talking about our ancestors and Helen's upbringing in Uganda. And when you were sitting under the tree talking to all of your ancestors and learning new skills and crafts, but you were hearing their ancestral stories. Now, often these 7 generations of cellular memory pass down subconsciously, generation to generation. But in your case, it might not have even been subconscious. You might have actually heard some of the traumas and fears and beliefs of your ancestors out loud, out of their actual mouths. So you were getting it on both levels, subconsciously and verbally, and through subconscious programming and the energy coming down.
Yeah.
So talk about your lineage, where the women were expected to be sub, um, subordinate, not educated. What what kind of default programs? Can you remember anything specifically that came from that experience with your ancestors?
Mm. I think the main one that I do remember, like my grandmother and my great aunts and everybody, is just your sense of who you are is closely tied to the person you're married to. So in a way, you almost didn't have at least that's what it felt to me. And maybe it's not true for everybody, but that it felt like they didn't have their own identity. Like their identity is wrapped into what their partner does. So I remember asking my mom once, I was like, why is it that you support dad in everything that he does? What about you? Like, how come you don't have your own thing going on? And she was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
You
And
know,
so that was, go ahead.
you said something really important right there. You said, I don't know if this is true, but for me, this is what I perceived. And that's
Yeah,
a really important thing that you said there,
yeah,
because whether it was true or not is not what actually matters.
yeah,
Really matters for all of us, and our default programming is what we individually believe
yeah,
to be true,
yeah,
whether it's true or not, from our childhood perception without really having the whole big story.
yeah.
So, what was that kind of default program that got drilled into you?
Well, I also grew up in a Christian family. So another default program is um, faith and service. So we were a family of service. I mean, we had, even though I have only 2 brothers, in our household, there was always like 20 or 30 people living with us because it was a family of service. So that was drilled into, yeah, that was drilled into me. And that's why I do what I do. I am a person of service, but I was wondering if I could share a story. Is that okay?
Oh, please do. We
Right.
love stories.
Yeah, I kind of just want to share a story about how whatever gets passed down, or even your lived experience, that it lives in your body. Most of the time, people think, oh, I've gone to that experience and it's gone. No, it's still in your body unless you process, you reprogram. And so this became evident to me. I remember in 2007, I was working as a psychotherapist then, and a client was sharing her story of being held at gunpoint. And all of a sudden, I think I was 30 something at that point. All of a sudden, my whole physiology reverted to a 7-year-old remembering a memory of war where my brother was being like a soldier was dangling him and holding a gun to his head. Whose kid is this? Whose kid is this? And up until that moment, I had no recollection of that memory, but clearly that memory lived in my body, right? Because the brain is really smart, right? It's going to just file everything, not important, not important, not important. But something, somebody will say something, and before you know it, you're triggered and you're like,
And we often don't know why we're triggered because we're just freaking out about something that was so buried long ago
right,
uh, in our subconscious. And
yeah.
so, what happened after that?
Well, and
When
that's really what got me into this line of work. I mean, I studied trauma. I really wanted to understand the brain-body connection. I got into EFT tapping, into the chakras. I even worked with you because I remember that, right? I remember that one session last year where you did your magic and we went and retrieved that 7-year-old because she was frozen, fight, flight, freeze. She was frozen. And I'd done a lot of work, but I didn't realize how frozen that part of me was. So it lives in
yeah,
my mind.
I remember that, and it was extremely powerful. And I mean, as a therapist, for all of you out there who are therapists too, you know how empowering it is for you as a therapist when you really get to the roots of something that your client is dealing with, just like recently you did with me too. Because when you're in your own stuff, you can do lots of work, and hopefully you all do. You dive on in, you do all the work, you use all your tools, and this is where it's great to have somebody else's professional
Yeah,
perspective on things because they can really help you shift. They can help you go deeper. They can introduce a new tool, a new way of looking things to help you clear even more of that subconscious stuff that you're holding because it's not their stuff. So they can
right,
see it a lot more easily.
right.
So recently I was invited on the QM2 with my dad to sail across the ocean. And most people would be like, oh, how wonderful, how fascinating. But no, for me, it was like, oh my God, getting on a boat and sailing across the ocean again.
Because
It's
it
like
brought up some memories, right? It brought up
it
your old memory.
triggered old memories of sailing, not on a massive ship, but in a
Yeah,
48-foot boat. And even though I had done lots and lots and lots of clearing work on that, sailing you can kind of avoid really easily, right? But suddenly it all triggered up again, and I didn't know what else I could do. So I started to do the tapping
happy.
with
Yeah,
you, which was
right.
absolutely
Well, because
fascinating.
yeah, the body keeps the score, that famous book. The body remembers. Unless, and that's part of like both our work together is like, how do we release it? Because as a therapist, we did a lot of talk therapy, and talk therapy is invaluable. But some of this stuff, it still stays in your nervous system. And until you release it from your nervous system, it will pop up. It will pop up. So yeah,
Yeah, it keeps coming up, and it can come up in a multitude of ways in very many different areas of your life. Can you give some examples?
well, I mean, like, so back to this experience that I had when I
With
was
your
living in when I was living in Uganda, um, none of that really bothered me. But once I migrated to the US and I left my Ubuntu and my community, one of the things that I did experience was just a lot of anxiety. I mean, I felt a lot of anxiety. I felt hypervigilance. And I think partly, yes, the PTSD was manifesting, but also I didn't have that safety that I used to have. So I had a lot of, yeah, anxiety. And I remember after this incident that I talked about, my supervisor was like, do you want to get on medication? And I'm like, no, I want to see how I can handle this the natural way. So it manifested in a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
anxiety.
sometimes, like anxiety, it's such a huge umbrella subject. So it's like, yeah, anxiety about what, right?
See,
So it's
that's
about,
that's the thing, right? Sometimes you don't know what you're anxious about. And so when I started doing EFT tapping and I wasn't anxious anymore, I'm like, what's wrong? Because anxious was my norm. And so not having that, I was like, something is wrong. Something
wow.
is
Yeah, when you're worried about yourself because your day is going through peacefully. You're not stressed about anything. Oh my God,
Yeah.
something must be
Like,
wrong.
yeah, what's wrong? So,
It's really fascinating. And so, do you think that with EFT, that it helps you identify what the root problem is?
mm, yeah. So don't get me started. EFT tapping is one of my favorite topics. So for those of you who don't know what EFT tapping is, it's emotional freedom technique. And pretty much what it is, it's like you tap on acupressure points or the meridians, which runs on both sides. And just doing that, what that does is like it calms the part of your brain that controls your fear response. And it just kind of lets your body know that you're safe, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the reasons why people don't deal with their stuff is like it's too scary. They don't feel safe. And so tapping allows you to calm your body down. And then it also allows you to process difficult emotions. And it also allows you to file memories where they're supposed to be. So like this memory, the 7-year-old, that should have been way, 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 way back because it happened a long time ago. So what that
Mhm.
EFT tapping does is like it takes it back in terms of the timeline to where
Okay.
it's supposed to be. So it's yeah, EFT tapping is
That's
fascinating.
interesting. I haven't heard that before. I know about lots of modalities. I've played with a lot of them, but I didn't know that it transfers that memory back to the time that it ought to have been.
Right,
Right.
it's called memory reconsolidation. So it's like because like what happens when a traumatic experience happens is because we have to function, the brain just kind of like puts it down in the subconscious, puts it down in the subconscious. So think about it this way. It's like you're just putting away dirty dishes. You're putting away dirty dishes. You're not even washing it. You're just putting it away. That's what the brain does, right? And so with tapping, it's like you're taking out the dirty dishes, you're washing them, and then you're putting them away where they're supposed to be.
That's a really good metaphor to look at that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's really interesting because sometimes because a lot of our wounding is stuck in our cellular memory and a lot of it is subconscious. It could even be, well, it could be ancestral stuff that we don't know anything about. It could be from when we're in utero before we're born. Maybe you don't know anything about your birth experience or your mother being pregnant with you. I do have a PDF available, birth questions you can ask your mother, and it's on my website, shannonbtb.com. And you can download that from there, put your email in and download that, or shannonoflaherty.com. And that can help you go to your mother or father or grandparents, if they're still alive, to ask the questions that you need to know, because a little bit of information is a lot of information, actually.
Well, you got to be conscious before you can shift anything, right? If you don't
Yeah,
know, then how are you going to shift it?
absolutely. Tell people where they can reach you again, please,
Okay, so
Helen.
you can find me at helenorombi.coachesconsole.com. Again, it's helenorombi.coachesconsole.com.
That's
And
great.
uh, and I want to kind of just piggyback on
Before we go on, talk about your Awakening Women Collective briefly.
well, th this kind of brings because I had you on Awakening Women Collective precisely like you sent us those questions, and the women in my group they were supposed to ask their parents, but you coming in and just talking about that was so invaluable. So Shannon is amazing. Um, so Awakening Women Collective membership, it's a group that I started where I wanted to be able to take women through this framework that I developed, it's like 3 pillars that I developed. And the first pillar is moving out of survival mode, which kind of ties into a lot of the work that you do. That's why I had you on. So, so yeah, we release generational patterns, we release things from our history, from our family of origin, from our experience, we release that out of our bodies using EFT tapping and the chakra as our guide. So that's pillar number one. So all of that beautiful work is done in Awakening Women Collective membership, which is only $27 a month for 3 sessions, which is a steal. Come on, people.
It was really great and amazing women on there and absolutely fascinating conversations because a collective. Talk about that just very quickly in 2 minutes. Talk about what a collective means when you're joining a group because some people still are like, oh, a Zoom group, I don't know.
Well, so Dr. Claire Zammit has this quote, we cannot become ourselves by ourselves. We need one another. And so the benefit of being in a group is like, one, you might think you're the only one going through what you're going through. But when you're hearing, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too, that's the Me Too movement, right? It is because of the benefit of being in a collective. The other benefit is that you get amplified by one another. So you might think you're meh, but when somebody else hears what you're saying, they'll be like, you rock. I mean, the group that we had, like the Pod Sisters, that was a bit of a collective, right? And so being in a collective allows you to feel that you're not alone and the group can see potentials in you that you might not be able to see by yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
absolutely invaluable.
That's really interesting. And yeah, there were wonderful questions, there was wonderful conversations. And also when I teach on the coaching calls, I'm not the guru sitting on the hill. I don't have all of the answers. A lot of people in there know a lot of stuff that I don't know too. So a collective is like everybody's offering their wisdom and insight together in a
Yeah.
community sort of format, which is really
Yeah.
wonderful. So after this next short commercial break, Helen is going to take us all through a tapping script.
Woohoo!
And there is a script for tapping, but you can explain that briefly before we go into it. But if there's something that you want to heal or find out or discuss, that's coming up next, and you can do that healing with you. We're going to do it live during this time. So we'll see you after the short break for a little bit of EFT tapping with Dr. Helen Orombi. See you soon.
See you soon.
Hi, welcome back. Shannon O'Flaherty here, and I have the great honor of interviewing Dr. Helen Orombi today. And we've been talking about generational ancestral wounding and how it manifests and the collective and all sorts of really fun things. And now Dr. Helen is going to take us all through an EFT tapping script to help you heal and shift, well, anything you need to heal.
Well, in this particular case, I'm going to invite people to focus on either an emotion or a belief or a pattern. And
Mhm.
so, first of all, I'll show you what the tapping points are, and then I'll talk a little bit about what we say, which is the script. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
points are the karate chop point, right? Which is like right here when yeah, sure. Yeah, right here. Eyebrow point is like where your eyebrows meet, like right here, and then just follow it, side of the eye, follow it underneath the eye, and underneath the nose is right underneath the nose. Underneath the mouth is where this little cleft is, right there. Collarbone is easiest is just you can just tap on your collarbone, but it's like you see where the collarbone bone is, you just come down a little bit, it's right here. Underneath the arm is about 4 inches from your armpit, and then top of the head, right here. And so, what do you
Better
say?
already.
Again, you feel
I
better
feel
already.
better already.
Right? Like we didn't even do anything, but we just tapped. So, to your
Well, it's
point,
it's interesting because I did a tapping session with Helen when I first found out about the sailing thing. with a script about fear or whatever it was about we were working with. And I could feel this kind of all of my sort of fear energy was here. And at the end of the session, it had kind of moved like
Yeah.
somewhere down there. And I thought that was really interesting. So last week I was on the way to the dentist. I'm like the biggest wuss at the dentist. I'm walking to
I
the dentist going, even though I have this fear inside me, even though I have this fear. And I didn't have a script, but I just kept focusing on what it was that was making me nervous. And I was
yeah,
tapping as I was walking,
yeah.
and I calmed down considerably even without a script. So these points are really important meridian.
Right, because what you did right was you focused on the moment. You focused on what it is that was scaring you, what the thing was. And sometimes it doesn't really matter what you say, but if you can just focus your attention on the fear, in your case, it was the fear. Yeah.
Mhm.
And sometimes just breathing and just tapping on these points. It
So
worked.
you're going to take us, so tell us now,
So,
and I think have some water. If you
yeah,
all have
yeah, you're right. Let's have some
Have,
water.
I'm a big water fan because our bodies are, over 70% water, and we need that for all of our points to fire correctly. So
Right.
you never drink enough water.
Well, and also like after doing tapping, it helps to drink water, just again to flush down anything that came up.
So
All
tell
right.
us what script we're working on now and what do our viewers need to do to get ready for this?
Okay.
And we're all
So
gonna do it together.
all right. So I'm going to guide you through just one round of tapping. So usually in tapping, you start with a negative. If it was a longer round, you just the whole round would just be a negative round, and then you transition into the positive. But since we're looking at time, we're just going to do one round, and it's going to entail both the positive and the negative and the positive. And so I'm going to invite you to, can I guide you already?
Yeah, 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 go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to invite you to take a nice deep breath in and exhale. Now bring to mind either a belief, a pattern that's holding you back. So a pattern such as, I'm not good enough, or I'm afraid of visibility, or an emotion. So it could be fear, it could be sadness, it could be anger. Bring to mind that memory, that emotion, that experience, and just notice it. And so since what we're focusing on is generational pattern, the language I'm going to be using is the language of pattern, belief, and programming. Okay. And
Mhm.
so tapping on the side of the hand, repeat after me.
And I just remind people that if the words aren't resonating with you,
You can change it, use your own words.
yeah, so that
Yeah.
it makes more sense in your
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
On
For the
that
most part,
part.
I try to make it generic. So even though I've been carrying this pattern for so long,
Even though I've been carrying this pattern for so long, and say it out loud.
I deeply love, honor, and accept myself.
I deeply love, honor, and accept myself.
Even though this belief has been part of my story,
Even though this belief has been part of my story,
I now choose to release what no longer serves me.
I now choose to release what no longer serves me.
Even though I feel the weight of this old programming,
Even though I feel the weight of this old programming,
I acknowledge it with love and I set myself free.
I acknowledge it with love and I set myself free.
Now we're going to the points. Eyebrow. This pattern has been a part of me for so long.
This pattern has been a part of me for so long.
Side of the eye. I have carried it without even realizing it.
I've carried it without even realizing it.
Underneath the eye. I think I'm ready to let it go.
I think I'm ready to let it go.
Underneath the nose. I honor the past, but I don't have to repeat it.
I honor the past, but I don't have to repeat it.
Underneath the mouth. I can choose a new way forward.
I can choose a new way forward.
Collarbone. I choose to release this old belief from my body, mind, and spirit.
I choose to release this old belief from my body, mind, and spirit.
Underneath the arm. And I choose to set myself free with love and gratitude.
And I choose to set myself free with love and gratitude.
Top of the head. And I choose to step fully into my power and my truth.
And I choose to step fully into my power and my truth.
Okay. You can stop tapping, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions to take a deep breath in and exhale. All right. So that was very generic. So what I'm curious about is like, what pattern did you tap on? You, Shannon.
Yeah, me, Shannon. Yes. I was looking at not good enough because I started with procrastination. So I thought, well, what's procrastination really about? Because I know I've done all the belief work, da, 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 da. And I thought, well, there's something, some kind of fear. So I could have tapped on fear. But as we talked about these patterns of not good enough, I'm dealing with the visibility thing here with the TV show and everything. I'm dealing
You
with
are.
that for years. But I thought, let's look at the not good enough thing again, because maybe that's at the root of procrastination more than fear. Could be either. So I thought tapped on fear last time with you, so let's tap on something new this time.
Yeah. So how was it for you just tapping on that? It was just one round.
Yeah, it wasn't as huge a shift as that fear thing was. I mean, because I only just found out about that, and I was like, ah. So I'm not kind of in that mode. I'm not good enough right now. Obviously, I'm interviewing you here.
There you
So
go.
I feel things very palpably in my body. I don't know if my viewing audience does or not, but I did feel something move here.
Mm, yeah,
Something moved. It wasn't as kind of big of a shift, but
yeah.
and you might not feel anything, and that's okay too.
Right. And the thing about tapping is like because it's working at the most unconscious part of you, you may not feel it right away, but a day later, even a week later, you're like, something shifted. Something shifted. So that's the beauty
When
of
you know that something has shifted, you keep you keep doing this, right? You keep
keep doing
tapping
this.
to
Right.
reinforce the shift. So what next then after you would tap?
So after you would tap, and so this is like asking even the bigger question. After I've tapped and let go of this stuff, what's next? Well, what's next is really then writing the new story of who you want to become. So like in your case, you were tapping on I'm not good enough. Well, what do you want to believe instead?
Well, yeah, that I'm absolutely capable of everything I put my mind to doing, which secretly I also believe. So in my world, I deal with dual beliefs, right? If you have good beliefs and bad beliefs at the same time, you might have a loop-de-loop kind of roller coaster life. And I don't really have a roller coaster life anymore. It's much more stable.
Right.
But I was just playing around with that. I think probably mine is more based in fear, fear things about not doing more than not good enough because I had a more palpable experience with the fear. So I don't know. I could investigate that a little bit.
Well, right. And so part of like what the next step would look like is like you'd get to decide. So I'm not good enough doesn't serve me. Well, what would I want? Like in your case, yeah, this is your first experience. There's a lot of learning curve. There's going to be a huge learning curve, but you are absolutely capable. And so part of what it will look like is like you keep tapping on the belief that you want to install, and then you begin to take actions aligned with the woman who is capable. She can learn technology and all of that stuff. So that's what's next.
That was sneaky because Helen
I
knows.
know. I had to throw it in.
Helen knows my my weak link is tech.
That's the
But
beauty of having a sister.
using technology is really important when you have an online business. And I use all sorts of tools. So I've been using solfeggio tunes for more focus and stuff. So lately I've been focusing on specifically on getting out of procrastination because that's that's how whatever it is, it's either fear or not good enough, whatever the root thing is manifesting in a block with procrastination. So I thought, well, I can't find the root of it right now for whatever reason. So I'm going to just focus on the actual thing and work my way down. So
Mm,
wherever you need to start, it's okay. There's no hard and fast rules about this.
yeah,
So we only have a few more minutes left. Unbelievably, this time went so very quickly
it
with
really went
Ellen.
fast. It really
But
went
if there
fast.
was going to be a key takeaway of tapping or ancestral generational conditioning, could you sum it all up in 2 minutes?
In 2 minutes. All right. So, well, first of all, Shannon's amazing listeners, I would invite you to join the collective. But if you can't, go to my website, download an ebook that kind of shows you how to go about doing this work. And so if I was to leave you all with a message, become conscious of your patterns. Become conscious of your patterns and commit to rewiring your brain body system to become the person that you want to become, right? Because you can absolutely evolve beyond your current conditioning. That's what I would leave everybody with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because having that vision of who you want to become, you need to be able to be who you want to be
Yeah.
before you can be that.
Yeah.
So in whatever way you can be that person, like this is why I've been focusing on getting out of procrastination because procrastination is a blocker. So I thought, well, I want to be somebody who doesn't procrastinate. So I've been working on that specifically because that version of me doesn't do that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So find whatever way, in whatever small way, don't make it a big, overwhelming thing. But Helen, it's been an absolute pleasure and a great honor to have you here and share all of your wisdom and your wonderful tools for healing. Tell everybody again where they can find you.
You can find me at helenorombi.coachesconsole.com. There's a free ebook there you can download. So Helen Orombi at coachesconsole.com.
Thank you. And you can find me at shannonbtb.com or shannonoflaherty.com. And we'd love to hear from you and see how your experiences with this tapping has been and any other comments that you want to add about ancestral wisdom or generational conditioning. Helen, thank you so much for being my first guest. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So much love to all of you, and I'll see you the 4th Tuesday. No, it's the end of February, the second Tuesday in March.
In March.
And
Thank you so
there
much.
I'm going to be interviewing a doula, which is really exciting.
Ooh,
Okay.
good
Lots
stuff.
of love. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. You have been listening to Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance with Shannon O'Flaherty on Transformation Talk Radio. On the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, we connect the dots between your ancestors, your birth, and the patterns that keep you stuck, guiding you to a place of profound healing and unstoppable brilliance. By examining and healing your cellular imprint from birth of how you perceive and respond to the world and the challenges that are created in your day-to-day life, we can begin to heal and live more balanced and fulfilling lives. For more information, visit shannonbtb.com. That's shannonbtb.com.